Hey, everybody. Welcome to the I Am a Woman podcast. I'm super excited today to have an amazing guest on the show. Her name is Abby Johnson. She's the founder of Pro-Love, and she's also the author of the new children's book, What is in Mommy's Tummy? She is a voice in the wilderness when it comes to the pro-life debate. I've watched her from afar on Facebook and had the opportunity recently to be on her podcast. And now I want to talk with her today about what it really means when we say, I'm a woman and my name means life. What does it really mean to be a life giver in this culture and in this generation? So super excited to have you on the show, Abby.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So Abby and I were just talking before the show. You have 8 children?
I do. I have 8 children.
And are those all biological children or did you adopt?
So all but one. We adopted our 5th child, our 4th boy, and he's 9 years old now.
Wow. And where did you adopt him from? Was it local or was it an overseas?
Yeah, he's from Maryland. So it was a domestic adoption. We adopted him at birth. It was super unexpected. We were not planning on adopting a child at that time. We had a 7-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, a 1.5-year-old, and a 6-month-old. And we found out that through my best friend that there was a baby that needed a home. And we were like, okay, we'll figure it out. So,
oh my gosh, if more people just, didn't hesitate like that,
Yeah, it was kind of crazy because I did not run it by my husband before I said yes. I found out from my best friend that there was a baby that needed a home, and I was kind of like, okay, like we can do that. And I had to go up on. I was speaking actually at an event, and I had to go up on stage quickly, and so I just kind of made a decision and said yes. And then I got up on stage and gave my talk, and got off stage, and I thought, okay, I guess I should tell my husband what I've done. And he was like kind of mad, but also it took like 3 days. I was still on the road. I was on the road that whole time. And after the 3 days, he called me and he was like, I've been thinking about it. And he said, every time I think of a reason that this is just absolutely crazy, he said, I think of our future and this little boy is always in it. And he said, I think we should do it. And by that time, like I'd already been working in the background. I had secured an attorney for us and an attorney for the birth mom. And I already had like our home studies set up. Like I knew he was going to come around, he just takes a minute. So it was really awesome. And now Jude is 9 and we have a really close relationship with his birth mom. And it's just been incredible. I mean, it's just been like one of the greatest blessings in our life. We've always been, people who said that if a baby needed a home, we would be, open to opening our home. And we never wanted to be a family that didn't walk the talk,
Right.
And so when that time came, it was kind of crazy to do it, but it was our moment,
It was your moment, to walk the talk.
And to say yes, and to give that yes, to like give our fiat to the Lord, to say, okay, we're going to trust you and we're going to say yes, knowing that there's going to be times where it's difficult. There's going to be times where we're like juggling babies, and there's going to be, times where we're thinking, oh my gosh, what did we do? Like we're not going to have a lot of sleep and finances maybe, tight or whatever, but we just, when we set our lives on this course to be pro-life and to live out our pro-life beliefs, I mean, we meant it and we were sincere about it. And when those opportunities arise, like that's really when the rubber meets the road. What are you going to do? And we just knew we had to say yes.
That's awesome. So let's talk for a minute about how you ended up on this road. You worked at a Planned Parenthood for how many years?
I worked there for 8 years. I got started there, just as a college kid, just not knowing really anything about abortion, or I was really just ignorant and kind of like ignorant in my faith too, like I knew my faith in my heart, but I didn't have like head knowledge of my faith. And that is needed as well. Our feelings get us into trouble. And I think especially as young people, we want to like, oh, I just want to go with what feels right. It feels right. Sure. It feels good, and that's what got me into that place of destruction, really, was just going with what felt right and not having like that faith, that godly knowledge up here, not being able to express the faith that I had in my heart, not being able to defend it properly. And that was nobody's fault. I grew up as an only child. I grew up in a very isolated kind of bubble, like Christian bubble, kind of idyllic, really. I grew up in a small town and I went to a private school and was in church all the time. Every time the doors were open, we were there. And so I think my parents were just kind of like, I have friends that were like, oh, my brother taught me about, these things, or my sister, told me about what my first kiss was going to be like, or whatever. I didn't have that,
Okay.
Just me and my parents, so I didn't grow up like learning bad behavior or anything like that from siblings. So, I mean, I grew up in the church and was pretty innocent and sheltered and kind of what you want for your kid, I guess. But then I ended up going off to school to one of the largest universities in the country, Texas A&M, and was met with a pretty heavy dose of reality pretty quickly and was introduced to a world I'd never seen before of just drinking and partying and guys and just attention from guys. And that was when I was introduced to Planned Parenthood as well. Just introduced to kind of their talking points, their propaganda. And meeting someone like me, this naive, sheltered college kid, for Planned Parenthood, that's like hitting the jackpot. Right?
Really?
Because I knew nothing. I mean, and so they could really take my mind and mold it into whatever they wanted it to be.
Wow. That's so crazy to think that because you would think that a Christian would automatically know that Planned Parenthood is a culture of death, or
I never even heard the name Planned Parenthood before.
Right. And that's part of the problem, right? With the church, it's not ever educating the young women and them not addressing these issues directly. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. And like my parents, they were pro-life, but like I didn't grow up in a town. I grew up in a little town in South Louisiana. There was not an abortion clinic within like a couple hours of where I grew up. Like my parents were not like pro-life activists in any way, shape, or form. We didn't go to marches or rallies, or we didn't stand out in front of abortion clinics. And it was really a different time as well. I'm 44 years old. I was born in 1980. It wasn't a time where people were standing up, women were standing up in front of podiums and, shouting their abortion. It wasn't a time where women were walking around like with t-shirts that said, I've had an abortion, you know?
Right.
It
It was
was,
sort of a silent,
it
everyone
was.
knew it, but it was sort of a silent, almost, to me, it seemed, I was not a Christian in college, but it seemed kind of a silent shame or
Yeah.
something
Well,
that nobody really talked about.
that was really a time where, like, we grew up in a time where sin was still coupled with shame. And we don't live in those times anymore. I mean, we live in a time now where people are very, very proud of their sin. So much so that they created a flag for it. I mean, that's how proud they are of their sinfulness. But that was not the environment I grew up in. That was not the day and age I grew up in. You know,
Sure.
truth, like when I was a kid, truth existed in an Encyclopedia Britannica.
That's no longer the case either.
Yeah, no, like, because there was no internet.
Yeah,
When I went to
dictionaries changed.
college,
Sure.
the internet didn't exist.
How do you think not having the internet and not having that sort of in your face culture of sin impacted your understanding of what you were really walking into? And what did you find in Planned Parenthood? What did you find there?
I think my parents thought, well, we send her to church and we send her to youth group and she goes to all the youth group camps. So they're talking about all the hard things.
Right.
And then the church thought, well, the parents are talking about all the hard things. And so like, nobody was talking about the hard things.
Yeah.
And that's a lesson to parents today. I don't think it's any better today. I think kind of everybody shucks the responsibility onto someone else instead of parents just taking the responsibility and saying, these are my kids. This is my responsibility to educate them about sexuality, about morality, about what's happening with their bodies, about responsible relationships, about boundaries. Nobody wants to like take the lead. And so, you know, Christian parents say, well, the church, we want the church to handle it. Secular parents say we want the school to handle it. And the church isn't handling it. And the school is giving them really worldly, terrible information. Right. And so now we've got, you know, generations full of kids that have really poor understanding of, you know, what their bodies are meant to do, what their bodies are made for, what babies are made for, what sex is made for. And because we have parents that have really shirked the responsibility and have given it over. They've given their parental role over to the government, or they've tried to give it over to the church instead of just embracing it and saying, this is my job.
Right. And a lot of it's coming through media now. It's coming through the internet.
Through the internet. Yeah. And so, you know, for me, when I was given these like talking points from Planned Parenthood, and I'm told, you know, oh, well, you know, Planned Parenthood wants to help women. I thought, great. Like, I want to help women, right? Like, who doesn't want to help women? Everybody, you know? And, you know, they want to help low income women. Fantastic. Like, who doesn't want to help low income women? All of that sounded good. All of that sounded like a worthy cause.
Sure.
And I remember her talking about abortion, and I remember saying to her, well, I've been raised pro-life. And she said to me, that's good. Pro-lifers are good people. They're just misguided. And that was kind of the key in the door, right? To make me go, well, what do you mean? And she started talking about back alley abortions, women dying from these back alley abortions, things I had never heard of in my entire life. I had never heard these talking points before, and I had no way to refute what she was saying.
Wow.
Because I knew nothing about it. I had never heard this before in my entire life.
Wow. That is such a huge point on why churches and parents both have to educate about bodies and sexuality and sex makes babies and babies are, created at conception or before the womb, as Jeremiah says, in God's mind and God's heart, before the womb. And every girl in our nation needs to understand that. So you do not understand that. So you go in. What did you experience with the girls that were going in there and having the abortions? What was the part that you played? And what was it like with the people you were working with?
It was interesting. I think I thought that the abortion clinics were going to be like a really sad, tragic place, kind of going in. I thought it's going to be a really depressing place to work. Because that's what we're sold. Like as the public, we're told that abortion is a tragedy. We're told that, women don't want to have abortions. We're told that having an abortion is a devastating decision for a woman. But I got to tell you, that was really not what I experienced in the clinic. It was not a tragic place to work. There was a lot of camaraderie there, among the staff. I mean, I loved my job. I loved what I did. I loved the people that I worked with. And I loved the women coming in. It was not a sad place to work. It was not about half the women coming in for abortions that already had abortions before. So there wasn't this narrative that the pro-life movement has spun out there that women are so sad coming in for abortions, or, women are so scared, or they're so afraid, or they're so unknowing about, abortion, or they're all victims of what it's just not true. There was never a time where a woman sat in front of me and didn't call her pregnancy a baby. They all call their children babies. They all know they're pregnant with a baby. 60% of women who have abortions already have children at home. They know there's children in their womb. We aren't living in the days like of the 70s and 80s where ultrasounds aren't available, where they think it's like tissue or whatever. Like they know. A lot of these women have already had ultrasounds with these children, and they're still going through with the abortion. There's a lot of like joking and laughing in the waiting rooms before their procedures, kind of like this like mama attitude, like, girl, I've done this a bunch of times, you're gonna be fine. And they're, kind of yucking it up and laughing and kind of like mothering each other through the process.
Wow, that's not at all the way I picture it. That's amazing. That
there's lots of prayer.
You're kidding.
No. There's lots of prayer in the waiting rooms. Women praying with each other, praying for each other, praying that their procedures go well, that nobody comes out hurt. Women have been told that having an abortion is an act of compassion. And they really believe that. They really believe that they're killing their baby because they care about their baby. And so they've really, drank that in. Mm-hmm. And so there's just not really any sadness until they're done with their procedure. The only sad place in an abortion clinic is the recovery room. That is the saddest room in an abortion clinic. It's the darkest room, like physically dark. There's curtains everywhere, or there's no windows, or the windows are covered up. It's kind of physically dark, spiritually dark. And every woman cries. Every woman cries. Wow. After an abortion. And that sort of like camaraderie and laughing and everything that they felt before is diminished in that room. And our job, if you're working in the recovery room, is to help them kind of steel themselves. They've got 20 minutes to suck it up, to reconvince themselves that this was the right decision for them, to dry the tears and walk out the door. And That was our job in the recovery room.
So what was your awakening to all of this? Like, what shifted for you?
So there were several things the last year that I worked there that kind of were defining moments for me, where I think God was really kind of working on my heart. But ultimately, the last thing that kind of broke the camel's back was participating in an ultrasound guided abortion procedure where I watched a 13-week-old baby fight and struggle against the abortion instruments. And I knew then that there was life in the womb. That was undeniable. There was humanity in the womb. And I knew that seeing those things, I knew that if what I had seen was true and I believed it to be true, I believed what I had just seen, then I knew that I was on the wrong side of this debate. And so that's when I ended up leaving.
So how did you go from that place to establishing Pro-Love Ministries and what you do now? And share with my listeners what you do now and how that transition took place.
Yeah, so I never intended to be public about my story. Honestly, I was quite embarrassed after I left Planned Parenthood. I didn't want, because I felt really stupid for working there for so long and just like not seeing the truth. And so I never had any intention of publicly sharing my story. Like I had found another job and I was like, okay, I'm just going to kind of slink off into the distance and pretend this chapter of my life never happened and just go on about my way. But I knew so much. I knew all their dirty laundry. I was so high up with them and I knew too much. And so Planned Parenthood ended up suing me to get a permanent gag order against me so that I wouldn't tell all their secrets, which was funny because I never had any intention of doing that at all.
So they wanted to put a gag order on you before you started speaking out.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And when they did that, they also sent out a press release to the Associated Press. And that then in turn caused the AP and all these media outlets to say, like, well, what does she know that you don't want us to know?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what does she know that you don't want her to tell? And then all of a sudden I was like front page news everywhere. And it was shocking because I really didn't think it was that big of a deal. I was like, okay, like I left my job, big deal, but it was a big deal. And the things I knew were a big deal. I didn't even realize it. But because I was just so used to it, you know, I was just so used to working in it every day. I didn't realize just how bad it was.
So when they were trying to get to shut you up, did that make you want to speak out?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I knew there were a few things for like that they really didn't want me to say. Like Warren Buffett was their largest anonymous donor, and I worked with his foundation. And I knew that that was one of the reasons that they had sued me because they really wanted to keep him anonymous. He really wanted to stay an anonymous donor. And so I knew like as soon as we got out of court and they didn't win and I was allowed to speak, I was like, well, that's one of the first things I'm going to tell everybody. It kind of made me defiant, I guess. And it made me want to speak. I'm like, okay, obviously these things are so bad that they're trying to shut me up. And so I mean, I've got to say them now. And so I did. And again, like just things that I didn't really realize were that big of a deal, but they ended up being a huge deal. And, you know, clinics were closed and that was how I started my first ministry. And then there were none because I knew there were other people like me who worked in the industry who knew things, who wanted to leave, but felt trapped, you know? And so when I started and then there were none, I just put out basically like a call to abortion clinic workers and said, we can help you leave. If you want to leave, we have, lawyers to help you. Like, don't feel trapped.
Mm-hmm.
And don't feel trapped by like the money, the salary, the benefits, like whatever it is. Like, we'll help you leave. We'll help you find another job. And so we've been doing that for a few years, and we've helped almost 750 abortion clinic workers leave. And I mean, these are like doctors, nurses. I mean, these are the people that are, killing the babies. And it's not just really about helping them leave. It's about getting them into a relationship with Christ. And I mean, that's what we consider a victory.
Sure.
So we've done that. And then those workers have turned around and shut down 48 of their former abortion clinics.
Wow.
So that's been amazing. And then, and then I started Pro-Love Ministries, which is an organization that fills gaps in the pro-life movement. And our biggest project that we work on every day is Loveline, which is a case management support line. We try to find resources for women who have abortion appointments, single moms who need help, who may be abortion vulnerable. And if we can't find the resource, then we become the resource.
Mm-hmm.
And we've helped over 7,000 moms, 15,000 children. We've moved almost 300 women across the country to protect them and their children from domestic violence. We've kept over 400 women from being evicted from their homes and apartments, and have kept them from being on the street with their children. We've helped cancel almost 300 abortion appointments last year. And these were women that had abortion appointments canceled. I mean, they had abortion appointments scheduled, and we said to them, what will it take to cancel your abortion appointment? And they told us, and we filled whatever it was. And
what is the answer to that question? I mean, is it just completely varied, or
sometimes it's, I'm being abused by my husband and I'm worried about my children, and we're like, okay, solved. Like, we'll fix that. We'll move you and your children to a safe place. Sometimes, one time it was a woman called in and I was on the line. I answered and she was like, I don't want to have an abortion, but I have an appointment scheduled because I have 3 children and a small car, and I don't have enough room for another car seat. And so I'm going to have an abortion. And like, to us, that may seem silly, but to her, that was a very real problem. Like, where are you going to put your kid, And I was like, if I buy you a car, will you cancel your abortion appointment? And she was like, well, yeah, but like, nobody would do that. And I was like, I will do that. Just cancel your appointment. And we found a minivan for her that day. And I went on my Facebook and I was like, we got a woman with an abortion appointment. We need to buy her a minivan, and we want to pay a year of her insurance for her. And within 45 minutes, we had raised $25,000, and we bought her the car that day and covered her insurance. And now her baby's like 2 years old.
That's amazing.
And so it's just like things like that. We've helped people become citizens. Deportation was on the line for them. And that was a reason they were going to have an abortion. And so we've worked with immigration attorneys to stop deportations and to help them get on the right pathway to citizenship. I mean, it's just crazy things, all kinds of things. I mean, just whatever it is. I mean, like, a woman will be, $3,000 past due on her rent.
Sure.
And she's like, I can't even pay my rent. How am I going to raise another baby?
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, please don't kill your baby for $3,000.
Right.
Like, we got it. Like, we will come alongside you and do that. Like, please don't kill your baby for money.
Wow.
And so not only do we like pay the bills, but we also have an amazing financial coaching program that we get them in, and We help them budget. We help them cancel subscriptions they don't need. We help them get on a pathway to financial freedom. And we have a program called Mama Scholar. So we help them if they want to go back to school and complete a certification program, an associate's degree, a cosmetology degree. They want to get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. If they want to go back to school and become a doctor, we have a scholarship endowment program that will pay for every semester along the way.
That's amazing. And is that all donor supported, or some, or
it is all donor supported? Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, man, has God been on you and on your ministry? That is unbelievable. Like I'm blown away. We talk about all the time on this podcast, what is the meaning of the word woman? You know, that a woman is a life giver.
Yeah.
And not only are you teaching them that, but you're living that. You're living that in everything you're doing in your ministry. And I'm just so honored to have you on the show and to have you share this story with everyone, because I know so many women who have had abortions, and the grief, the PTSD, the trauma that they experience afterwards is very, very real, and it haunts them. I have dear friends that are truly still haunted. And this is such a powerful way to get involved. You guys, if you can support her ministry, you can go to prolove.com to do that. And I think that we can all get behind Abby and what she is doing and truly living out the message that our name means life, that's what women are created to be, is life givers. And that's the thing that the pro-abortion movement has, or they call it pro-choice movement, has lied to girls about, is what it means to be female, what it means to be a woman. And at the very core, we're created to bring life. And when we deny that part of our being, we're going to grieve. We're going to have pain. One thing that you said in your introduction to your book, Unplanned, and this is where I want to close out today. Oh, how we love to vilify our opponents from both sides. You said, I testify that there is good and right and wrong on both sides of the fence. And even more shocking, we have far more in common with the other side than we might imagine. Mm-hmm. What do you think that both sides have in common? And how can that impact our attitude towards people who are pro-choice? Mm-hmm. How can we relate to them and not vilify them?
I go on college campuses a lot, all the time. Now, you're never going to find me recording some liberal college student trying to embarrass them on a college campus and putting it on social media for clicks or anything. That's not my style. That's not who I am. That's no shade to people that do that, but that's just not who I am, because I don't believe in vilifying the other side. What I find is that I can have really passionate discussions with people who believe differently than me on abortion, who believe differently than me on about many things. But we can walk away shaking hands. We can walk away sometimes with a hug, because they see that I'm not the stereotype that they want to believe about the pro-life movement. Yes, there are going to be people in the pro-abortion movement who do fit the stereotype of what you think about abortion supporters, right? That they hate babies, and that they're screaming about abortions, and they're blue-haired and crazy and whatever. But the overwhelming majority of people who support abortion rights are people who believe that supporting abortion is helping women. Mm-hmm. They believe that to take away abortion rights would be to take away a vital right from women.
Sure.
To protect their bodies.
Okay.
That women would be harmed in some way, that economically they would be harmed, that socially they would be harmed, that their medical freedom would be harmed, that their bodies would be harmed if they didn't have this right that they believe is a fundamental right.
Sure.
And so they believe that way because they do believe that they are caring for women properly. The problem is that we just see it very differently.
Sure.
Right? We see two people. When we look at a mother who's pregnant, we see two very distinct people.
Sure.
We see two patients, right?
Right.
Who need to be cared for.
Right.
They do not. They see one person, the woman, and they essentially see a parasite. And it is the mother's decision whether that parasite lives or dies. And that is at her sole discretion because that parasite is leaching off of her. That is, they don't mean it to be dehumanizing, even though it is incredibly. That is just that is the bill of goods that they have been sold.
Right.
Society has sold them for many years.
Yeah.
That their bodily autonomy, that their right to bodily autonomy supersedes any right to any child in the womb. So there are many people who, I go on college campuses and there are many women and men, these young people that I talk to, and they'll say to me, you know, Ms. Johnson, I know that it's a baby in the womb. And I know that it's living. And I know that a woman kills a baby during an abortion. But I just believe the woman has the right to do it because her life matters more.
And how do you answer that?
Well, you know, I think it kind of goes back to seeing value in people and helping them understand their own value.
Sure.
And I think that that's kind of what's lost in our society today.
Yeah.
You know, when I was growing up, I didn't know anybody that committed suicide.
Right. I know. Right. That's so true.
None of my friends committed suicide. Nobody in my high school committed suicide.
Right.
Cutting, self-mutilation, burning yourself, that didn't exist when I was in school. It's so prevalent now.
Yeah.
And I think it's because young people just do not value themselves.
Right.
And so, of course, they don't value the child that they created in the womb. Because they don't even value their own lives. So how can they properly value someone else's life? And so when someone tells me that, which I appreciate, I appreciate them being honest with me and not lying.
Right.
So I appreciate their honesty. Like, don't lie to me and say, like, it's not a baby, it's not a human being, it's not alive. Like, that's just inaccurate. Like, it's just factually inaccurate. I would much rather someone just be honest and say, I know it's alive. I know it's a human being. I just think a woman should be able to kill it. I would much rather deal with that sort of argument because to me, it tells me something so profound about the way they view themselves.
Right.
And so that's what I want to start talking about with them is
their value
they have and the value that they had at the moment of their own conception. And do they have siblings? Do they have brothers and sisters? What is the value that their siblings have?
Those are such good questions because, you know, as you're talking about the way that they see it, in my mind, I'm like, I have like an argument for every single point, you know, and I think that pro-life people have that argument that in a way vilify, like you said, it can vilify them and it can judge them rather than leaning into their real need, which is to see that they are created
and they're hurt. They're hurt.
Yes, they are.
And so, I mean, I just so many times, I mean, because I am a mama. And so I look at these kids and so many times when they say that statement to me, they'll say that to me and I just, oh my gosh, I just grab their hands and I'm like, oh, and I'm like, can we just come over here and sit down and talk? And they'll talk to me. And, so many times they just open up to me and they'll start crying about their childhood or how they were made to feel in high school or how they were bullied or how they don't know what they want to do with their life or whatever. And it doesn't mean that they walk away pro-life, right? It doesn't mean that they walk away saying, man, you've really changed my mind about abortion. But I hope they walk away feeling like the person who was pro-life that they encountered that day deeply cared about them, deeply cared about their life. And I think that is how we turn a nation. I think that's how we turn a culture, is not by constantly arguing with everybody, but by looking people in the eye and taking hold of them and taking hold of their hands and saying, oh my gosh, I want you to know how valuable you are.
I love that.
And showing them that.
Yeah, because that's what we're missing at that point. And whether it was because we were pro-choice or because we were just lost and confused, like I was, when people reached out to me for Christ, they looked me in the eyes and they cared about me as a person. Yeah. And I saw that I was living a meaningless life. In my case, in the modeling industry, I was living an empty life and I knew it and I didn't know any way out of it. And I didn't know that I had more value than that. That was really the key to why I left modeling, why I do what I do with my ministry now and teaching girls there. That's what we do with You Are More. We teach them value, identity, and purpose in Christ because it begins with them understanding their value.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I think it's so much more powerful than, like you said, not to judge anybody who does that, but so much more powerful than putting a camera in their face and making them look like idiots on social media and fools and proving them wrong.
And embarrassing them.
I
don't care about being right. That's not why I do what I do. I don't do this to be right. I do this to show people that Jesus loves them. They were valuable at the moment of their conception, just as these children are valuable at the moment of their conception.
And so, it becomes natural then when you understand your value, that Jesus died on the cross for you, that, like I always quote the pearl of great price, that he's, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for a valuable pearl. And when he sees one of great value, he sells everything he has to buy her. And when we really understand how valuable we are, we begin to treat others as valuable as well.
Yeah.
So good. Thank you so much, Abby, for sharing your message and your ministry with us today. I'm super honored. What an amazing story of how God can use a woman in a very dark place, like I was, like Abby was, and turn her life around by teaching her value and helping her understand the purpose of a woman, which is to be a life giver in every environment she is in. And when you lean in, Abby, to those girls on those college campuses, you're bringing life to their souls. Like you said, you're not proving them wrong. You're not trying to be right. You're leaning in and showing them who they really are in God's eyes, which is valuable and precious. And when we get that, we change how we see life in the womb.
Yeah, absolutely.
So good. So good. Okay. I don't ask everybody, but I try to ask everybody this last question before we end the podcast. What is your answer to the what is a woman question? What is a woman to you, Abby?
A woman is, besides just the actual definition, a woman is someone who mothers. And whether that is biologically, spiritually, a woman is someone who mothers. Pope John Paul II said that women were created to mother the earth. And he didn't mean that in a climate change way.
Right.
He meant that in every way, that women care, we nurture, we love well, we guide. And I think that is every woman's calling in life. And I think a lot of it, society has tried to strip that away from us, as they have told us that we are to be like men, but we are not to be like men. We are to be mothers. And that's going to look different for different people. I have a beautiful friend in my life who was never able to have biological children, but she's one of the greatest mothers I know.
Wow.
And has mothered so many young women. She's mothered them in youth groups, and she mothers women in our ministry, and she mothers them spiritually so beautifully. And I think that is God's call to women.
I love it. Women are created to mother. So on that note, thank you so much again, Abby, for being on the show. And I hope all of you share this message far and wide, especially with the young women in your life, to remind them we're created to bring life. We're created to mother and to shepherd the next generation. And that's exactly what Abby's been doing. So you've given us a great charge today. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.